name's Paul. I'm the CPD manager. So I support the trainers on the training team, and we work together to help make courses to support children in early years, which hopefully benefit practitioners, managers, and so forth in delivering the best practice they can for these special little people. So what I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to talk to you about a definition of what mental health is. We're going to look at strategies to build children's resilience, and we're going to look at how we can secure attachments for children as well. So if we start with this, are you all having trouble seeing the PowerPoint? Sorry, I do apologize, folks. Can you all see the PowerPoint now? Perfect, 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 perfect. So you missed out on seeing a picture of my face really close up, so that's actually perfect timing. So, like I was saying, if we start off with this, so you might have heard earlier on in the year that the government has decided to invest money into supporting children's mental health. And what the Department for Education were quoted as saying is, we're investing more in mental health support with an additional 2.3 billion a year being spent by 2023 to 24. Now, if you consider the government donating that amount to something so specific as mental health, it would suggest that it's a tremendously important consideration for all of us in our society. But I think there are many people that still don't have a very clear understanding of what mental health is. So what we'll do is have a look and see if we can break down and get a bit more understanding as to what mental health is and how it can affect our children. So if we start off by looking at what mental health is, mental health affects the way we think, feel, relate to others, handle stress, and basically make decisions throughout our lives. So I think an easier way of explaining it is, in the same way that we all have physical health, we all have mental health as well. It's what we use to go through our day to day. Now, when we consider what a mental health problem is, that's where a person experiences distress, which could include things like depression, stress, anxiety, and could lead in some cases to things like conduct disorders. Now, before I talk about conduct disorders, if you think about depression, stress, and anxiety, they are very heavily loaded words. But the word depression, if you think about the life that each of you has led, we've all had moments where we've been really sad about something. It could be the breakdown of a relationship, it could be the breakdown of a washing machine, but we all have times where we just feel down and we feel a bit sad. So with that in mind, depression is something that can affect anyone at any time. But many of us will be able to be dealing with the depression and then get out of it. Anxiety is where we think about things that could happen in the future and we get ourselves a bit worked up about it. Stress is where we've got a lot on our plate that we have to deal with and we don't really feel that we can cope. And that word cope is something that I want you to remember because we're going to come back to that shortly. Conduct disorder is something the likes of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and this can show itself with children who have an extremely poor attention span and a tremendous amount of energy. One of the things for you to consider is you can have children who come to your nursery who have things like ADHD but don't have a diagnosis. So one of the things that I'm going to repeat again as we go on is the fact that our observations as practitioners of our children, especially in early years, is of tremendous importance. Now, when we're looking at mental health, you can really break it down to a scale. You can have positive mental health, fairly mentally healthy people. You can have a person who remains in a generally unpleasant situation, and then you've got a person who may experience a mental illness. On one side, you've got a person who's able to cope. On the other side, you've got a person who is not coping. Now, in my opinion, when we're thrown challenges in life, we can drift from the positive end of mental health all the way over to not coping so well. But the whole point is what we want to be able to do is when we experience challenging moments, we want to be able to get out of there. In order to do that, we want to try and build our positive mental health. Now, for our children, positive mental health is about them having friendships and sustaining them. It's an ability to play and engage, and also developing an understanding of what's right and what's wrong as well. Now, sorry. Now, this can all be a tremendously challenging job to give to child carers and parents because all children are different and we all want the best for children. What we're going to talk about in a short while is our expectations for children and how they could positively impact the children and how they can negatively impact children, even though they come from a very positive and hopeful place. Now, the NHS, they released a study and it's called The Mental Health of Children and Young People in England, and that was released in November 2018. And I do apologise for anybody who's got specific tidiness issues, because I put those circles together myself and the aim for them was to be symmetrical and it really did not work out. So apologies if it's bothering anybody. But what that's supposed to represent is a group of children. What the NHS found from their study was that 1 in 18 preschool children was seen as having a mental disorder. Now, a mental disorder, like I said, it can be an ADHD, but it could be the likes of a schizophrenia. It could be that we've got children who are behaving in ways which we think are tremendously challenging, and they can be. But the reality is sometimes in early years, children receive a label, but then that label is not extended to give children the support that's needed in order for them to achieve their best. Beyond there, it said that 2.5% of children consisted of oppositional defiant disorder when it came to their mental disorder. Now, if you've not heard of oppositional defiant disorder, I really encourage that you research it and encourage your staff team to as well. Oppositional defiant disorder is where children really struggle with authority. So it could be something as simple as asking a child to sit at the lunch table and their response is to stand up away from the table. It could be explaining to children that we're going outside to play, and as much as that child loves to play outside, they're going to refuse to do it. Oppositional defiant disorder definitely shows itself as challenging behaviour, but what it's really important for staff to do is monitor this so they can share observations of this and then potentially get the child the support they need from there. Now, this study also said that in 2 to 4 year old boys, that boys are more likely to be affected by these behavioural disorders than girls. Now, for anybody that talks to me about children, whether it be their own or children in early years, they'll know that I get on my soapbox when it comes to boys' behaviour and early years. I strongly believe that there are lots of boys who are given direction in their early years, which can be damaging to their short-term life and their long-term life as well. Now, the number difference might not be too big, but if we consider all the children that are in England, then that 2.6% difference represents a tremendous number of children who are potentially going undiagnosed and unsupported into school and potentially beyond school. Now, for all of this information that I've researched for this, I have left the web addresses in the corner of the PowerPoint so people can access those should they choose to be on here. What I'm going to do, because I'm totally aware that I've given quite a lot of information so far, is just give a moment or two to see if there's anyone that's got any questions they want to raise at this point. So I'll just go quiet for a few seconds, and like I said, if you've got any questions, if you just type those in the chat box, and then I'll aim to respond to you. Okay. So it seems nobody's got any questions at the moment, but I'll give you another opportunity in a short while. Hopefully all of this is making sense to you. So the Mental Health Foundation, they did another study, and they suggested that there's a number of children who've experienced mental health problems in their early years. They said that 30% of the children who had experienced a mental health problem received appropriate intervention. So what we're talking about with appropriate intervention is support and understanding from the adults around them, and then potentially additional support from professionals outside of the early years provisions or indeed school provisions. But unfortunately, opposing that 30% is 70% of children who did not receive appropriate intervention or support. Now, one of the things that I would inform you of at this point is if you look at the NHS website, they will list things like the autistic spectrum disorder as a mental health problem. So what we're looking at here is a number of children who are experiencing things like autism, ADHD, psychosis, and a range of other things. And the one thing that they may get is a label of being challenging, naughty, or whatever. But what they are not getting is the support that they need in order to get through a day effectively and build coping skills to get through said day. And I do apologize, every so often my screen freezes. Hopefully that'll pick up shortly. So, this is quite random, but bear with me. So, generally, I believe that adults want the best for children. So, we want children to be liked, we want them to have friends, we want them to play, we want them to have fun, and we want them to be protected. And just in case you don't recognize that handsome chap, that would be a very, very, very old picture of me with a little girl called Emily that I used to look after in Greece. But other than showing off about an old picture, we also want children to be cared for. And generally, we want them to be happy. But one of the things that I'd consider you to think is that enough? Keep that thought in mind for a moment. We're going to come back to it. This is a mountain range. Now, if you imagine the tops of these different mountains are splendid viewpoints. They are splendid viewpoints where you can get some of the most tremendous images that you can share with others that you care for and you can cherish yourself. Those are the peaks. Beyond there, if you consider this is the mid-range, there's some nice stuff there, but it's quite forgettable. And then imagine you've got to take photographs down here in the swamp. It's dark, it's murky, but nobody's really supported you to understand how to take images down there. It might be that your camera doesn't function that well down there. What this is supposed to represent is your life. Your life is going to have peaks and it's going to have valleys. So your peaks are really good times. And I think that through childhood that most children are supported to enjoy and exist in good moments. The mid-range are average and forgettable moments, which we all have. Your dark and more murky moments are your low times, the times when you're really quite sad. Now, we understand as adults that life has tons of ups and downs. But one of the questions that I'd encourage you to consider is, do we support children to develop skills that encourage them to enjoy good times and then cope with challenging times? Because in the same way that you would need to be trained to take a good photograph at the top, you need to be able to take a good photograph at the bottom. Now, you can call these photographs, you can call them memories, call them what you will. But what we need is for children to be able to enter young adulthood, and indeed adulthood with a skill set that allows them to cope with all the experiences they have. So if I go back to this, excuse me, when we consider that we want children to be liked and have friends, we need to consider not everybody's going to like us. We need to consider there's going to be occasions where we have friends, but we fall out. We want children to play and have fun, but sometimes they're just going to want to chill out and not do anything. And then the next one's a really quite tricky one. It's just a bit of a shame my photograph's there. But we're going to have times where the people that are there to protect us may not do that. It might be because they don't have the skills. It might be because they just don't want to. That can be a really hard thing to deal with. And then the final thing, being happy. I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure on children to be in a state of euphoria. Life's not always happy. We have moments which are really challenging. So, a question is, all of this sounds like I'm trying to get you to have children experience awful times so they can cope with life. That's not it. But what I am saying is the skill set that children get trained to have when they are young can affect their coping capacity or their mental health when they get older. So a question for you down at the bottom. Does it matter when they're so young? I'm going to pause there for a moment because I've given you quite an abstract analogy, and I'm sure you might have a couple of questions there. I'll give you a couple of moments. No questions so far? Okay, let's move on. So does it matter when it's so young? Actually does. 90% of the child's brain development happens before the age of 5. The further 10% happens after the age of 5. So a number of the coping skills that we adults use on a day-to-day basis, they will have been learned through experience in life, but a number of the behaviors and the ways that we cope with situations will have been developed when we were very young children. So how do we support children? If we want children to cope, what we really need to do is help build resilience in their childhood. And what I'm going to do is show you a few ways that this could be done. We can offer children support. This is important because what we need to do is model effective coping strategies. But in the same way, it's also important to offer support to children so they are able to accept help, so this becomes normal to them. Because there are some children who indeed grow into adults who don't like taking help because they see it as a sign of weakness. We want to avoid that and encourage support from a young age so it becomes an easy thing for people to do. We want to encourage exercise. Research shows that exercise releases endorphins and it helps people feel good. Uninterrupted one-to-one time. So we want children to know that they are important enough to have time spent on just them and things that interest them. Sometimes for children, if they see others receiving one-to-one time that they're not receiving, that can really damage self-confidence, self-awareness, and a range of other self-images that they have. We want to give children opportunities to solve problems. If children have opportunity to solve problems, what they're beginning to do is build trust in themselves that they can cope with situations. But if they've got adults around them who are constantly doing things for them, what you'll get is children who don't have the capacity to deal with problems as they arise. Sleep. Sleep's a really important factor of allowing growth, of allowing rest to organs, and just allowing us to recharge and restart. Now, in early years, I know there is a big, big debate of sorts that goes on regarding children's sleep, because I know there are some children that come to nursery and parents request a limited amount of time for their child to sleep through the day. One of the things I would encourage you to do independently is research the importance of sleep for children and try to support and educate parents. Because I totally understand that parents don't want their children to come to nursery to sleep all day, but I also see the importance of children getting the rest that they need. And then I'm also considering the impact that having sleep interrupted could have, because I'm sure all of us have seen children have a sleep and then be woken up after their time limit, and then they're just really grouchy and they just don't engage. And that's because their body hasn't gotten the rest or the restart that it's needed. So again, for all of you working with children, especially those that have sleeps through the day, I really would encourage that you look at the importance of sleep in early years and the impact that interrupted sleep can have on children. We want to look at limiting processed foods for children. Now, if children have a lot of foods which are freshly made up for them, then this releases a range of chemicals to the body and it makes the body feel good. It allows the body to process the food effectively. But if you think about the term processed, it's made up. And what's happening is you've got children who, in their important years when they're growing, they're ingesting a range of chemicals which, in many cases, the body is not supposed to process. And this can make them feel like they're dragging along, quite literally. And we want to allow children to feel loved, trusted, understood, valued, and safe. Now, there are some children that will come to our nurseries and they will have an amount of confidence which is tremendous, and that's fantastic. But there are going to be some children who seem to take time to trust the new people that are around them. We need to understand that in the first years of life, in the first 5 years, children are experiencing the world for the first time. And in my personal opinion, some of the most important skills that we teach children are social and emotional skills. So building relationships is a tremendous life skill for children to have. We should be modeling to children what relationships should feel like, how interaction should feel, what people do when you're upset, what people do when you're happy, so on and so forth. And that leads us towards developing attachments. Now, before I go any further, I'm just going to give a few more moments just to see if you all have got any questions at all. So I'll give you a few seconds just to see if there's anything that's popped to your mind that you want to query. Okay. Got a question there. And that's from Afnan. So when you say model behavior, do you recommend literally role playing a conflict between staff and resolving it? That's a really good question. I think one of the things that we need to consider, Afnan, is children are going to learn a lot by what they see as well as what they're told and what they hear. So when I say that we need to model behavior, if you're looking at resolution, like the example that you gave, I think it's quite important for members of staff to observe children when they're having a fallout, let's say, and dependent on the age and abilities of the child, see how they try to resolve it independently. If these children are in need of support, then we need an adult that can go and explain to the child in language that they understand, how one another might be feeling and how they can resolve the problem. But I do think a tremendously important part of modeling resolution to children is the way that adults behave around one another. Because as somebody who's worked in nurseries for a number of years, you know, it's a very confined environment where you've got adults who are responsible for children. And as much as it would be great for all the adults to get on, you can have adults that fall out. And if there are adults who are in the middle of a fallout and they are, let's say, shouting at one another or ignoring one another, or they've got, you know, really negative body language, I really do think children can pick up on that. So I think it's important for adults to model what it is that they're saying to children. If they're encouraging children to talk it out, then adults should model that when they've got and when they're having a fallout, if it's in front of the children. Hope that answers your question. See if we've got any more. So Fatima, oppositional defiant disorder, can it affect children as early as 18 to 19 months? I think you'd have to look into the research of that, but I would say the toddler stage, it's in the contract for toddlers to be challenging. And the only reason I use the word challenging is because I know it's a word that will translate with practitioners. But if you think about the stage before the toddler stage where children are babies, what we have is adults who dote on the baby's every want and need. You know, the child will get kisses, cuddles, they'll have a member of staff or a parent that feeds them feeds the child, gives them what they want when they need it. But then all of a sudden you've got children whose legs start to work, they get a voice, they get a range of physical skills, and they don't understand the concept of sharing yet, because sharing is a life skill that needs to be taught. And by the way, lots of adults don't have the sharing skill. So I think with toddlers, to answer your question, what you get is children that get a lot of excitement because they've got so many new skills that they want to use, but they just don't have a fear factor. They don't have an internal risk assessor. So what it's going to seem like is children are defying you. But in reality, if you take a step back, what they want to do is explore their little world with all these new skills that they have. Hopefully that answers your question. And I do apologize for the coughing fit that I'm having. I did forget to bring a glass of water in. Okay, cheers, farmer. Okay, so if we have a look at attachments. So developing attachments, they basically start with somebody needing something. So if you think about a child arriving at your nursery, they're really upset because their mum or dad or main carer has gone. What they're going to need is some reassurance. And the way that they will request this is potentially by crying. Some children might do it in a bit more of a direct way by going to an adult that they've got a bond with. So what happens is the child has a need. They're upset, they need reassurance, they need calming down. Beyond there, they need that need stimulated. So again, if a child's really upset, dependent on who the child is, you might have a child that needs a cuddle when they get really upset. You might have a child that needs to exert energy when they get upset. You might have another child that just needs time to be left alone. None of their peers bothering them and no staff bothering them. Once the need's stimulated and satisfied, the child's going to relax. So once they feel a bit better, they'll calm down. Once the child's relaxed, what that will do is start a little chain reaction. And that chain reaction is the child building trust in the adult. They've seen that their need was met and they develop trust in this person. That trust enables the child over time to feel secure, and that's where attachments begin. And if you think about us as adults, it's the same sort of thing that happens. If you think about any team that you've worked in, generally you have the honeymoon period where everything's amazing, but when challenges occur, if you receive the support that you require from certain individuals, then you will build trust in that person, you'll feel secure around them, and you'll generally relax around them. Whereas if you're working with people who you don't trust, who you don't feel comfortable around, it's really going to be hard to build an effective professional attachment. Hopefully that bit makes sense. Now, seems really swift, but I have had you on for half an hour at this point. What I've done is the information there, they're excerpts from our introduction to mental health in early years, which is a face-to-face course. So what I'm going to do now is leave a few more moments for you to have a think and see if you've got any more questions. But some of the other courses which may be of interest to you, if this one was, is our Promoting Positive Behaviour course, Supporting Babies and Children with SEND, and our Play Teaching and Learning course. So again, I'm going to leave the mic open for a few minutes, see if you've got any questions that pop up, and then I'll round this session off. Hopefully it's been helpful. Give you a few moments. Thanks. Okay, folks. So since it seems you don't have any questions just yet, what I'm going to do is encourage you to go on our social media and follow us on Facebook. Alison can see questions popped up. This session has been recorded and it will be available on our website. And like I said, for further information on mental health for children, because this was just a tiny taster, then do look out for the Mental Health for Children in Early Years course, which is one of our BB training face-to-face courses. So again, for social media, if you follow us on Facebook, and I would say a shameless plug is I'm one of the very lucky people that's going on the staff transfer to Australia. And one of the things that we're going to be aiming to do is share some interactions with any staff who are interested online. So if you want to have a peep into what it is that we're getting up to down under, then do follow us on social media and yeah, join in the fun with us. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. If you follow us on any of those and you've got any additional questions, do shoot them up on there and we'll respond to you as soon as we can. Really hope the past half hour or so has been interesting to you and been helpful in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, we are going to make this available on the BB Training website. So if you've got any colleagues or indeed any friends who you think might be interested in it, it should be available in the next couple of days. And the website will also have a copy of the PowerPoint too. Thanks, Afnan. It's great. All right. Thanks, folks. Have a wonderful rest of the evening and hopefully see you soon.